YouTube vinyl community, Neil Diamond fans, random people on the internet, my name is Giggens, and we are here today to talk about Neil Diamond's 2008 album, Home Before Dark. Look at this. Released on Columbia Records back then. This thing was a #1. It was a #1 album for him. One of the few times he hit #1 with a whole full-length album here. So, very cool for Neil. This is an album that I bought when it came out, maybe the day it came out. But I remember at that time playing it and not being impressed by it because I was expecting something a little bit more lively or exciting at the time, and I was in school at that point, so I was looking for his '60s-esque feel of Neil kind of stuff, Velvet Gloves and Spit and all the Bang singles and all the early '70s stuff I grew up with and loved. So part of me was like, yeah, I want more of that. And the album before this, he had worked with Rick Rubin. They did 12 songs, which I was into at that time as well. There's a couple of good songs on there on that one, and so the anticipation behind the next album coming out was pretty big because here he was again working with Rick Rubin, and the critical reaction to his 12 songs album I think helped him kind of establish that, okay, I think I made a right move by working with Rick and doing something totally different. So Rick's approach was to take Neil Diamond and just strip it back, bring it back to this him in a room with a guitar just like it was in the '60s and early '70s, and be like, what can we make of this? We don't need the big fancy shirts, we don't need the big production, we don't need a whole bunch of strings, we don't need a ton of other instruments. What happens when we have Neil Diamond in a room and a tape recorder? Like, what do we do? And there's other guys on here too, it's not just Neil, but essentially, I mean, he wrote all the songs on his own, he played the guitar on this thing, which he hadn't done much of in years in the studio, so very cool that Rick Rubin's intent was to, like, get Neil back to old school Neil Diamond. Which there's back and forth to that, because, like, on one hand, it's kind of like, well, what's wrong with everything else I've done over my career? On the other hand, it's like, okay, well, I can appreciate what I did back then. Maybe I can do a new version of what I used to do back in the day. Maybe that can spur some inspiration. Maybe I can come up with something new based off how I used to write songs, or whatever the case may be. But some artists might see that as a slap in the face to be like, hey, your first album, man, that was great, but everything else you've done since that was terrible. You should make an album that sounds like that again. Some people wouldn't be too open to that, but Neil Diamond's a cool guy, so who knows? Anyways, so when this album came out, I vividly remember playing this through and being like super underwhelmed by it and unimpressed by it because it's really long, and a lot of the songs at the time I thought sounded the same. They just went over and over and over again. It's an acoustic guitar, it's him singing. I get it. Time has since passed since then. I've grown up, I've matured some, I've heard more albums, I've discovered more music in my life, and I've gone back to this thing. So this is the first time I've heard this thing in a minute, at least since 2008 or 9, the whole way through. It's been, as I'm recording this in 2019, it's probably been a decade since I've played the entire album all the way through. It's been a while, and so I was kind of excited to get into it because I was driving in my car one day, and I don't remember what station I was playing on, Spotify or whatever I was doing, but If I Don't See You Again or Pretty Amazing Grace, I can't remember which one it was, came on. And it kind of caught me off guard because I was like, man, this is a really good song. Like, this is really capturing my attention. I'm like really invested in this. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll go back and play that thing. So a couple of weeks went by and I'm doing other stuff, and I brought this thing out and I was like, all right, let's do this. Let's sit down and just sit down with this thing and listen to it. And here's what I thought. If I Don't See You Again, the opening track on here, it's long. It's a bloody long song. It's like 7 minutes long or something. But there's moments where you can say something like that and be like, yeah, 7 minutes, who cares? But lots of dynamics or something, or shifts, or different parts of the song may arise. This song in particular does kind of repeat the same thing over and over again, but the building and the tension that it creates as it does that, I think is something you can only appreciate with time. I think if this was the first Neil Diamond album you ever heard, you'd probably be bored to tears. But if you've lived life and if you've figured out that some things need to take a while to stew or just become something, I think you'd appreciate the sentiment behind this album in general, but this track in particular. There's a lot of words here. It's a very wordy song. He's got the lyrics in here. The whole bloody lyric of that song is like one giant page in the booklet. Like, there's a lot to say. It's a song about getting it all out. Just in case you never see that person again, here's literally all the things I can list about stuff that I'd want to tell you just in case this doesn't happen again. It really drives home the essence of love, time, patience, consideration, loss. It's a very deep, powerful song that I think has to be the length that it is to really drive home the sentiment behind it. It's not supposed to be some quick poppy thing. Sometimes you gotta take your time explaining something. That's what this track is all about. And I find that fascinating now. I think when I was 18 or 19, however old I was when this thing came out, it didn't make sense to me then because I was like, I want something loud, fast. I want rock and roll. What the hell is this? Now looking back on it as I'm in my age, now I'm like, okay, now I get it. Now this makes sense. Thanks, Neil. Track 2 on here, Pretty Amazing Grace. This was a single, actually, and the more I hear it, the more... At first I was like, how is this a single? There's no way it's going to get radio play. And the more I hear it, I'm like, okay, I see it. I get it. But it's basically saying, hey, you saved my life. Like, I was in some dark places, and I wasn't sure where I can go or how to get out of that. You helped me get out of that hole. Thank you. So it's a great, beautiful song about acknowledging someone else's presence and how much they've helped establish you to figure out how to get through something. Because sometimes we don't have the words to figure out what we're going through. And if someone else could be like, hey, I think I have an idea, or let me just kind of talk to you about this as you tell me what's going on, and I'm observing your life, maybe what I have to offer can help. And sometimes that's the spark you need to be like, oh yeah, now I get it. I can go forward. That's what this song to me is about anyway. And just being kind of saved by somebody else and helping you establish yourself and your own identity and getting through the hard times. Very interesting song. Don't Go There. This is one of my favorite songs on here because this one for me really does capture the early feel of Neil Diamond. This one for me has that Do It era, that Long Way Home kind of feel. It's got a groove to it. I like the female background vocals, which is very reminiscent of the early days. And Neil in the liner notes here says that all the guys in the studio nicknamed him the Basher because of how he plays the guitar. And I love that because he is a very heavy-handed guitarist. When he gets into it, I mean, that riff for Sherry Sherry, that's one of the best riffs of all time. Think about it. Think of how many songs that inspired, especially like What I Like About You. That is Sherry Sherry. So his style of playing is very much just like hammering away. Neil Diamond's got some punk playing. I said it. Neil Diamond's got some punk playing. But Don't Go There is a fantastic song. The guitar picking, the strumming, like I said, the little vocal quirks that he throws in here and there, that adds a nice dynamic to the overall sound of the album, to hear things get changed up a little bit. Very, very cool and fun and funky to hear him do something a little bit different like that. The organ in the background I think is cool, also very reminiscent of the old days. But yeah, that's easily one of my favorite tracks on here is Don't Go There. Another Day That Time Forgot with Natalie Maines from Dixie Chicks. This is a fantastic song. Their vocal duet style works. Her voice is very pleasant against Neil. They just work really well together. I'd like to hear more songs from them. I mean, obviously it's been 10 or 11 years since this thing came out, but it'd be cool to hear that again. Neil has always worked well with duets. Like, Do You Know Bring Me Flowers, and there's others, but I can't think of them right now. The passion and the tension here is very cool. The little piano that bounces all around, the super optimistic acoustic guitar is really nice. So there's touches here of positivity that kind of, they don't go against the lyrics, but I think there's a nice augmentation, is that a word? Where the lyrics are trying to be positive even though they know maybe it's just another day that time forgot. The music's trying to keep that optimistic spirit there. Needless to say, cool song. Not my favorite, but I do like their vocal duet style there. One More Bite of the Apple. Piano touches all over this thing again, on top of the acoustic guitar. I love his yeah in the chorus, which is very Neil. I like that a lot. Nice build-ups throughout this track as well. And he mentions in the liner notes here that the line was inspired by someone saying something that, oh, we're going to get one more bite of the apple here. And some of the songs on here have been influenced by lines that either he said or his friends have said, which I think is pretty cool. Forgotten. This song took me by surprise too. This is more of a poppy, foot-tapping kind of song. It's catchy, sounds really awake, like a really lively track. Compared to the rest of them, they don't sound sleepy or anything, but they're more contemplative. This one's a bit more in the poppy tradition. Neil hammers away on this thing. This is very much in his punk playing. The Basher, as he was nicknamed on this thing. It sounds like he's having fun, which is pretty cool. For lyrics that are, about being forgotten, it sounds like he's having a good time. Act Like a Man, track 7 on here, basically saying that, life gets hard, you gotta stand up sometimes and try to figure it out. And that could be anybody, not necessarily a man, but it's just cool to hear him say, like, yeah, life can be really freaking hard sometimes. And Neil has always worn his heart on his sleeve. If you go back his discography, even down from the early days, like Solitary Man, that's a song about figuring out who you are and trying to stick up for yourself and get through life. And he's always been that kind of mentality of, like, doing his own thing, going his own way, being himself. Whose Hands Are These? I like the chord progression in this one, and it's sometimes kind of heavy strumming. I think the piano does really well to add some dynamic, which is nice. And yeah, not my favorite song on here, but I get it. Not a bad track. No Words, not a Paul McCartney song, but one of my favorites on here. It's a really upbeat love song, but not finding the right words to tell someone you love them, but loving the experience of trying to figure out what the words could be as you figure it out. It's just a really catchy, lively song, and parts of it remind me of Beautiful Noise, which I think is pretty cool. Like chord-wise, I think reminds me of that. Yeah, great song. One of my favorites on here for sure. The Power of Two. This follows the same kind of tradition, guitar, some piano, kind of a simple track. This one for me doesn't do a whole lot. It basically, I'm not gonna call it filler, but just didn't really speak to me too much. Not much new ground is struck on this one. Slow It Down. This song is interesting because it starts off really weird and then becomes more digestible after that, but Neil does something different where he's like doing all kinds of weird vocal quirks at the very beginning, and then he literally slows the song down to a really chill, smooth, enjoyable beat. And the song, his voice on this track in particular is like extra stripped. It just sounds super clean, like he's in the room with you, and there's like no echo at all. So it's a very cool production on this track, which I think is great. And then the last song on here, Home Before Dark, is a fantastic track. He wrote this by being inspired by his own line to get his wife home before dark. He put a note on his mirror or something, and he wrote himself a little message there, said, get her home before dark. And then wrote this really nice closing track. It was the last track they recorded for the album, and it does sum up kind of the feel of the album itself, which I think is a nice way to close it. But this is the deluxe edition, which comes with a DVD and some bonus tracks. He does a version of Without Her by Harry Nilsson. And Make You Feel My Love, the Bob Dylan song. Imagine that one. But yeah, some nice pictures of him on the inside. There he's hanging out. The back is kind of the same way. His guitar case. And then the inside, you got your book with his liner notes and all the lyrics and some good pictures on the inside. Some pretty cool players on here. You got a couple of the Heartbreakers with Mike Campbell and Ben Montench. And a couple of other bigger names that I've heard of before, but I'm not super familiar with their work. But overall, it's a solid album. I don't find this one of his albums that I'm gonna like cruise around and sing along to all the time, but it's a good album to put on and like have something to think about and listen to and really just enjoy the storytelling and the emotion and what he's trying to convey with every second of every minute on this thing. It's a really mature album. It's really well recorded. It sounds fantastic. I think it's well produced, and the songwriting is top-notch stuff in terms of just a mature songwriter being hungry for the craft and figuring out his life at that point. This album isn't meant to be some big chart smash where he's going to go out and be on MTV and on the radio all the time or something. This is just a really reflective piece of music, and sometimes that's what you need in your body of work, is to have a really nice, beautiful piece of music. And for being an hour long, this is something like that. So it's a great album. I don't think it's something I'll return to too much, though, beyond a few songs. I'd say maybe half on here. I'd put like a mix or something. Don't Go There, I think is great. Pretty Amazing Grace is awesome. No Words, Forgotten. And even though it's super long, If I Don't See You Again, I think is a great song too. So with that, I'm going to give this thing probably a 7 out of 10 because I really, really enjoy it. I respect it. Not my favorite album by his by far, but I dig it though. And that's it. My name is Giggens. This has been Neil Diamond, Home Before Dark, #1 back in 2008. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.